Hello, I'm Liselle Sambury. I'm a traditionally published author, and welcome to this Q&A video. So as background on this video, I decided to make this because I put out an open call on my community tab for if people had ideas about videos they wanted to see in my debut diary series. You can check that out over here if you want to see that series. It's where I talk all about the experience of being a debut author. And I found that there were a lot of great questions, but there were also a lot of things that I felt I could answer pretty quickly versus like doing a whole video about them. And so I decided it would probably be better to just do a big Q&A video where I can answer those questions, and then I can also answer questions that I asked through Instagram. So I've decided to do that to make things easier, and I got this idea from Ginger Reads Laney, whose channel I will link down below. I'm sure you probably know her though. The last time she did a Q&A, she separated them into like categories, so you could kind of jump around to whatever category of the Q&A you were interested in, and I thought that was a really good idea. So I'm doing that this time for my Q&A. So there's going to be 4 sections. So the first one is going to be publishing industry things, so questions about agents or editors and the publishing industry process. The next one will be about author life, so like my experiences as an author, so questions about that experience. And then the third one will be writing craft advice, or just like writing advice in general, questions that people have about how to go forward with their own journeys. And then last but not least will be questions about Blood Like Magic, which, if you didn't know, is my debut novel about a family of Black witches living in a near future Toronto. Those questions will be spoiler free, so if you like haven't read the book yet but you want to read the book, don't worry. When I'm doing that section of the Q&A, it'll be free from spoilers, so don't worry. And yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and get going with the Q&A, and if you want to jump around, there are timestamps, and YouTube should have done the little section thing so you can jump around to the different sections. So let's go ahead and get started. These are the publishing industry questions about agents, editor, publishing industry type things. So the first one is, what is considered a healthy writing career in terms of frequency of books published? Is 1 book a year the norm and or expected by agent / publisher / public, or are 2 or more books a year, same or different genres, better? So I will be completely honest and say that I have no idea. I do not know what is like generally considered healthy. I know there is a good chunk of authors that will write a book a year. I know a lot of authors that also think having to write a book a year is really strenuous and it's a lot of work. I know some people that are interested in writing multiple books a year. I'm one of those people. I would love to kind of do like a couple books a year. But I also think it depends on the person. If you are a full-time author, you may want to write more books in a year for financial reasons, so that you're able to continue writing full-time, and so you take on more projects, versus if you have a day job, you may not. In terms of like pressure or stress or anything like that from agents or editors, it really depends, because the way that publishing is set up when you like sign your contracts, for example, in young adult, when I sign a contract for 2 books, those books are going to be each year, and then you submit your option, and then there is the assumption that your option will come out the next year and the next year. So it is set up in a sort of book a year format, but I know there are people who will delay things, who are like, I cannot write that fast and I need more time. And I know a lot of authors who have had no trouble with that, and their books get pushed. So then it's not a book a year, it's like a 1 book, and then there might be a skip year, and then the book comes out the next year, things like that. So there is flexibility within the industry, and I think it really depends on who you get. I'm sure there are some people who get agents who push for them to write a book a year, or who push for them to write multiple books in a year. I've been really fortunate to have an agent that's like goes by by what I want to do. So if I have a book ready, okay, cool, then we can put the book out. You know, And what do I want from my career? So if I'm like, you know what, I want to put out multiple books a year, then she's like, oh, I definitely can see that you can do that because you are a fast writer and you do this and that. And you're doing this full time, and so you have more time and things like that. So it really depends. And I certainly don't have enough insight into the full scope to like say like, this is what most editors want and this is what most agents want. I think it really depends on you as an author and what you want from your career, and also agents and editors. It really, yeah, it totally depends. And it depends on what your focus is as well. Like, are you wanting to write multiple books a year because you need to financially make that much to continue working as your job? Or are you wanting to write multiple books a year because you feel like that's how many you need to write to continue to have good sales and attention and have people knowing that you have a book and your book is around and is happening? Very dependent is my take on it. In the period in between when you sold your book to your publisher and you actually received the contract, how many months was that? Did your publisher expect you to do any work on the book before you received your contract? Meaning, did you start edits of any kind? Thanks. So, in my personal case, both of my contracts for both my book deals took something like 3 to 4 months to get to me. In that time, I did not do any work on those books because I didn't have any edit letter to do work on them. So I just left it basically and worked on other projects. In the case of Butcherbirds, which is my 2023 YA, because that was a 2-book deal, but Butcherbirds is a standalone, I knew that I would eventually have to write a proposal for the 2024 book, which I'm calling Bear Hunt. And so I started working on that proposal right away just because I wanted to get it done early. So in that case, I was technically working on what is technically potentially a contracted book before the contract was completed. Just because I'm familiar with my publisher, is my second deal with them, and so like very comfortable. But I do know cases of some authors in which the contract was taking a longer period of time and in which their editor got them their edit letter really fast, in which case they did start working on edits on the book before the contract was completed. I don't think it's super rare to do that. I know like multiple people who have done that. In some cases, they've begun working on the book before the contract is done. I think there being assumption that you've accepted the book deal, and that I think most people assume that the contract is not going to fall through. It's just like it's being made up, and then they're doing the back and forth with your agent on like sort of nitty-gritty terms. And so I think that's why people will go ahead and do those edits beforehand. Also, in some cases, a book has like an accelerated release, in which case things need to move faster in order to meet the release date, which may be why like an edit letter comes sooner than expected or comes before the contract is even done. No one ever talks about agent commissions. I have no clue if there is a standard commission among agents or if it varies, or what is not within the realm of average. Is it higher or lower depending on the size of the agency? It would be great to know what to expect when that conversation comes up. Thanks. So to my knowledge, and from what I've been told, standard is 15% for the agent and 20% for foreign deals. So the 20% for foreign deals is because they will also have a foreign agent they work with, and the foreign agent needs to get a cut. And so that's why it's higher. So if you are soliciting agencies in the US, that agent fee should be 15% and the foreign should be 20%. And if it's anything different, I would definitely inquire about that and like ask why it's like that. Because I was told that if it's anything but that 15-20%, which is industry standard, that something weird is happening and you need to like look into why that is the case, and check up on it. Anything you can / want to share about contracts with a publisher? I feel like it's such a mysterious part of the journey. Like, does the agent go over it? Is it a standardized stack of papers with minor changes depending on the author, or is it more individual? What clauses to expect, any red flags, and so on. So I do not know enough about contracts, I feel, to say this, but I believe Alexa Dunn has a video about contracts where she talks about this. I will link it here and in the description. I just have to go and find it. I feel very confident that she has a video about this that I watched. So I'll definitely link it, because I definitely feel like she has more knowledge about that. But like speaking generally about some of these questions about like my contracts, so to my knowledge, a lot of publishers have kind of like a boilerplate contract in that they have a sort of stock contract that they have set up, and then depending on your situation they will do tweaks to it. So for example, if in your offer you have agreed to do something different, then that will get put into the contract and that'll get tweaked and adjusted. So the publisher goes ahead and they put that contract together, they send it to your agent goes over it. Your agent may also consult with other agents in their agency if it's like a clause they haven't seen before, or if it's something kind of different, or if there's a clause they want to tweak and they want to negotiate on, and they want to know more about if the agency's done that before. That's the sort of thing that they may discuss, things like that. And after your agent goes over it, they will send it to you and then you go over it. As like a layman, there may be things that you don't know, and I do encourage you to ask your agent as many questions as possible. So there were a lot of things I went through and I asked my agent, hey, what does this mean and what does this mean? And like there was one line in my contract where it had said like my option, it was something like it was a word that didn't seem, I couldn't tell whether they meant young adult or they meant young adult and middle grade. And so I asked about that, and that was something that we went over to make sure it was just young adult. Different things like that, that may be clauses in there. But I believe that Alexa in her video like very specifically goes over different types of clauses in that case, because I can only speak to my specific experience, and I feel like there are probably things in the contract that I'm not supposed to say. So I won't go super deep into that, but like there's all sorts of clauses. There's mostly clauses for like foreign. There's a clause for like in which case your book is considered out of print and the rights revert to you. There's clauses for audio, for foreign deals, for how many author copies you are going to get, and things like that. Is there anything else in here? Any red flags? The major red flag that I can think of is like some publishers, I don't know if they're still doing this, were putting in clauses that were like, basically said they were like morality clauses. So if they felt that you had acted immorally, they could cancel the deal, but they were very vague. And so it was very much like, well, how do you decide what is a moral behavior? And that was an issue for some authors because it felt like, well, what if I speak out about a social justice issue on Twitter and like people don't like it? Is that considered immoral by you, and can you cancel my deal for that reason? Or if I criticize publishing, can you cancel it for that reason? Is that considered immoral? And then also some clauses that I have heard of about like publishers kind of requiring social media input from authors, like contractually. That would definitely, I would say, would be something to look out for and to kind of see what exactly is being expected from you and things like that. And those are kind of the only two ones I've like heard people discuss as like kind of like red flag ones that I can talk about. But every contract is negotiable. That's what your agent is doing. They're negotiating that on your behalf. So definitely those are things that they can like push back on, and they can see how that's going to be done. This question is, hi, maybe how sales numbers impact your relationship with your editor and agent. This would be different for everyone, but I'd love to hear your perspective. I totally understand if that's too personal though. So for me, like this has been really positive. So I feel like it's difficult to have a well-rounded perspective on this, because it's not as if I like have multiple books where I'm like, this one got good sales numbers and this is how people treated me, and this one got poor sales numbers and this is how people treated me, because I've had positive sales numbers. But my relationship with my agent and my editor before I had those sales numbers and after I had those sales numbers is the same. So nothing has changed. The only like difference is like, if more things are happening with my book, then my editor, my agent need to email me more frequently. So, you know, if my book is going to be chosen for a book club or is going to be getting more PR asks and things like that, then my editor has to email me more about those things. And like, if my book is getting, you know, a bunch of things are happening, or like foreign rights or things like that, then my agent has to email me more. And I would say that's really the only difference. But even then, I think the volume is still the same. So for me, there hasn't really been any difference between my relationship with my agent and my editor. I would say the only thing that's like changed in positive sales numbers is like, what is it, like PR things, like publicist things. Like I have more things happening with my publicist, but then again, like I had those things happening because of buzz for my book even before sales numbers actually appeared. So to me, like that, those relationships haven't really changed. Maybe things behind the scenes in the publisher are different, but I don't have like eyes on those. So to me, everything is exactly the same as it was. Yeah. Okay, so that was it for the publishing industry type questions, and then I'm going to get into the author life questions, which are more specific to my experience as an author, and like how that goes. So I'll go ahead and get started. So, hi Liselle, hi! I'm curious to know what helped you more as a debut author, already having an established platform such as YouTube, or your publisher. In other words, did your publisher make it easy to market your book or your social media platforms? 100% my publisher. I honestly feel that what I do on my social media accounts in terms of selling my book is like so minuscule in comparison to what my publisher does, because yeah, it's just like I don't think it matters that much. I think especially because like in terms of like big YouTube channels and things like that, my channel is actually like fairly small. I think in the niche of Authortube it's bigger, but like in YouTube as a whole, like a big channel to me is like a channel with like 50,000 subscribers or 100,000 subscribers, things like that. And even then I would say that like it's hard to gauge the impact of that in terms of like selling books. But I think my publisher definitely has much more reach than me. My publisher is the reason my books are in bookstores. They're the reason I have an audiobook. They're the reason that my books could be sent out to content creators to create content and promote the book. They're the reason my book has the beautiful cover that it has. They're the reason that, you know, I get these publicity requests in that they field for me, that they help organize. I think my publisher is like doing, like in terms of marketing, my publisher has, I think, much more sway than what I do on social media, which for me is what I want. I am in traditional publishing because I don't want to be the main source of marketing and publicity for my book. I want the publisher and their teams to be doing that and have it be their job to sell the books. And whatever I do on my social media is just what I want to do and what I enjoy and what I think is cool and like what I want to share on my platforms. But I'm certainly not relying on it to sell books, and I in fact don't really think that it does. I think there are people who are on my channel who know me and hear me talk about my book, and if they go out and they purchase it and they read it or they borrow it from their library or what have you, and they enjoy it, I think that is wonderful. But I think probably the majority of my readers are not like subscribers to my YouTube channel, if that makes sense, and if that helps this answer make sense. But definitely to me, the thrust of the marketing half of my book is my publisher. And of course, I think I play my part in it, in that I did my best to write the best book possible that I could. And people enjoying the book, and that word of mouth, I think, is really powerful as well. Like people telling each other, and people that enjoyed the book putting out positive reviews and telling other people to read the book, and oh my gosh, you have to read this, I really enjoyed it. I think that has a really large amount of publisher. But in terms of like selling the book, do my efforts or do the publisher's efforts help more? Definitely the publisher's efforts. This could potentially straddle the like writing advice and author life thing, but because it's talking about reviews, I'm going to assume that it's specific to the author life. So how do you balance your ideas with criticism or feedback from readers if you read reviews? Do reviews you see change what you're envisioning for your book's plots and world? So I do not read reviews, but sometimes I do accidentally see reviews, in which case they aren't particularly helpful to me. They're usually like things about the book that someone didn't like that I like, or that I know other people like. I think if there's anything like I'm thinking about my future world or the books that affects me is like, you know, if I have an insecurity about something in the book where I'm like, oh, would people like this or would people not like this? And then I like accidentally see a negative review where they're like, this was terrible. Then in my mind, I go, so that was bad then, because I was already kind of insecure about it, even though I thought it worked out in the end. And so sometimes like that can happen. Like I accidentally see something and then it's kind of feeding something that I wasn't sure about, or that I was sure about at the time, and then I've later become insecure about. Sorry if you can hear my dog barking. I'm so sorry. But yeah, I would say that's the only thing. But like, I'm certainly not like seeing somebody's like, what if this happened? And then going forward with that. Like, that's not a thing. And in fact, that can be really, I believe that can be like legally like difficult. If you like see an idea someone had for your book in like a review and then you like go and you go forward with it, something like that. But something I will say is like thinking of what impacted people has kind of changed some of my thinking of like when I was going into the sequel. So for example, in Blood Like Magic, there are two kind of like big things that happen towards the end. And of the two big things, I thought people would care more about thing number 2, but in like hearing like positive reviews and like people talking about the book, it was the thing number 1 that people cared significantly more about. And so that in my mind did kind of signal, oh, maybe like that it was already going to be a thing in the next book, but I was like, oh, okay, I have to like try and resolve that in a really good way because that was the thing that people were more upset about. So like there is an effect in that way, even in positive reviews, in just kind of seeing where people's attention ended up shifting and what ended up being like the most interesting to people. Yeah, I think like it's difficult, especially for me as a first-time author. Like I can't work in a silo necessarily, but also like I wrote the whole second book, and was already like, I already wrote the book and was already in edits for it before Blood Like Magic even came out. So like nothing huge, which like to me is really comforting because I knew nothing huge was going to change in the book because of something I saw, because I basically already done the editing at that point. And so that's kind of the thing. So it's a bit of a balance. Like I think you definitely can't let reviews like rule what you do and like change how you're going to write something. But I also think it's natural to like, if you notice something readers are really enjoying, to kind of be like, oh, I wonder how I could like do that again, something like that. So yeah, I would say that's how that affects me. Did you tell family and friends that you write? And if they already knew before the book came out, did that change their perception of you in any way? Do you talk about writing any differently than you did before? So people did know that I wrote. I was pretty like open with that. And so that was something I just like had basically been doing since I was a teen, well, since I was like a preteen and also a teenager. So people in my family were very aware that was a thing I did. My partner was very aware. My friends were aware this was a thing I did. I don't think anything changed though. I don't think anything changed really. I think the only thing that changed was like now the things I was writing were out in the world, and so my family and friends were like, oh, I can like go buy it, and like now I bought it, and friends and family that read the book and really enjoyed it are like, oh my gosh, this is so good, I really enjoy your book. But they don't treat me any differently. It's like all the same basically. I think because my family and friends were always like very supportive of me writing, I never had any sort of negative reaction to it. So it wasn't the case in which, you know, they were like, I don't know, I was always working like a full-time job, but it wasn't the case in which they were like, why are you wasting your time with that? Or like, why don't you just, I don't know, just throw it up on the internet? Why are you trying to find an agent and do all this stuff? Like, I never had anything like that where like the book came out and they were like, wow, I'm so glad you like kept on with it or anything like that. People were just like, wow, that's like super amazing that you have this book coming out, and were excited for me. And that was basically it. Most of my like family members don't really read. So like a very small amount of them are reading the book. And like the family members that have like finished the book and like told me about it have actually been like my partner's family members. But it's like people who already were readers. So it was really natural for them to like pick up a book and read. And like my book, I know my book is big and I know it is thick. And so like I had no expectations on like having family members like pick it up and read it. Especially because it's like, you know, it's young adult fantasy sci-fi, and like that's not, they weren't reading, and if they were going to read it wasn't probably gonna be that. So but I've actually been surprised at like of the amount of them that have been like, oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna read it, and I've like started reading pages and things like that. So that's exciting. But yeah, I didn't notice any difference in the way that they treated me. Yeah, I don't know, but I would say in my family, I was kind of always like a bit of a golden child. So, I don't know. I was like, you know, I went to, considered in my family a fancy university. I had quite a good job. So I don't know. Maybe I was always a bit like that, so I don't think it was like supremely shocking. But I think it is like a lot of my family members, I feel are like very happy that I'm able to write full time now, because I think a lot of them knew that was something I very much wanted to do, but just kind of couldn't at the time. And so that's exciting for them as well. But yeah, about the same. What has it been like being a published author? Did it meet your expectations? It's very, like, I really enjoy being a published author. Like, I'm really excited. I love having my book and I can like hold it and it's out in stores and like people are reading it. Like, that's really amazing. I think it's different than my expectations because my expectations were like pre-COVID expectations. So there were things that just like shifted and like kind of weren't going to happen because of that. When I was imagining my life as a published author, I wasn't imagining being in a pandemic. So things are a little bit different in that way. But I think a lot of the things I really was excited for, like seeing my book on shelves and like getting to sign my book and getting to talk to people about the book, like things like panels and podcasts, I think have been really well. I think I've really exceeded my expectations because I think my book ended up getting a lot more attention than I expected it to get. And that I, as a published author, ended up getting a lot more attention than I expected to get. And so I've been really happy with that, especially in like writing full time. Like that was always a very far away dream. And I feel like I'm like living my best life. boyfriend was joking with his friend, and he was like, so Liselle's just at home living her best life. And he was like, yeah, you know, I write during the day, I like do YouTube videos for fun, I read a bunch, I like play The Sims. I'm essentially just kind of like doing whatever I want, very fancy free. So I'm having a wonderful experience as a published author. I think there are always, you know, still ups and downs, but I think I've always been very realistic about my journey. Like, I've never expected to be on a bestseller list or anything like that. I actually am. Blood Like Magic was a Winnipeg bestseller for a week there. I don't know if it was beyond that week, but it was there. So, but I never had designs on that. I didn't expect that of myself. And so I really just had like a super great experience. And sometimes I feel like too much when I'm on here and I'm like, everything has been great, because I'm like, oh my gosh, you look like you're a big fake. But I've honestly had such a positive experience. And I think to me, it's like that flying under the radar thing. Like, if your book had huge expectations and you couldn't meet them, or you just like met them part way, but not the way that everyone thought you were going to, I feel like it's really easy to not have a good experience. Whereas when I went into it, I felt like I had like, you know, just like basic expectations, and then because things went better than expected, everything just feels like rose clouds and like sunshine and dewdrops. And sometimes I like have down moments, you know, moments where I've been like, oh, I wish I could have done this, or I wish like I was able to have this experience as an author, or like, oh my gosh, I wish I was in a book box or like had an exclusive edition, but I don't, womp womp. But to me, like, those feelings in the grand scheme of things are so small. Like, generally my experience has been really good and really positive, and like, I wake up and I'm just like doing great. If I'm gonna have a down moment, it's like in the middle of the night when my brain decides to like thought loop on something sad. But I get over that pretty quickly. So to me, like, all the things I wanted from being a published author, it's not like I've achieved all of them, but I've achieved a lot, and certainly enough that I feel proud and that I feel happy, and that I feel like I've done a lot of the published author things that excited me. Do you ever fear that you'll run out of projects or distinct characters? So I never feel that I will run out of ideas. I will always have ideas. I have so many ideas. I'm overflowing with ideas that I'm just like, I will always have so many ideas. Distinct characters is a little bit harder, because sometimes I find that there are characters that I am drawn to, and like character arcs, like archetypes that I really like and that I enjoy writing. And so sometimes I worry that I'm overdoing it too much. I'm like, oh my gosh, is this character too similar to this character? Is this character too similar to this character? And I have to like work to make sure I'm not doing that, and to make sure I have a distinct character voice. So definitely, like, in terms of like distinct character, I have like felt challenged by that, and felt challenged by like making sure that I'm having distinct character voices, and like worrying about people like opening one of my books and being like, oh, this character is basically exactly the same like this character that we just saw. So I do struggle with that, and so I just like work harder on trying to find ways to make them very distinct. But like running out of ideas or projects, I never worry about, because I have so many ideas. I'm ridiculous with it. So I know that I'll always have ideas. But that distinctness is definitely a challenge. And when I'm having difficulty with that, I just kind of try and think of, well, what are these other characters like, and what's different about this character, and like how can I lead and push with that, instead of getting drawn into what I've already done before. But I also think it's difficult, because I think authors, you, on top of your character voice, I think you have an authorial voice, and I feel like that will kind of peek through in all of the works. It's just like, are they still different enough for that? So I do struggle with that distinctness a bit, but I just kind of like do it and try my best and like hope that it works out. Is it hard to make a living from writing books? Did it exceed your expectations? So in terms of like financially, like, is it difficult to make a living earning books? This always depends. And like, this is why, like, when I talk about writing full time, sometimes I do all of these disclaimers, to make it understood what my situation is. That like, I have savings and I live in a place where like, home ownership is cheap and I have a partner that helps me with this, and like if everything went belly up, I have a family where I could go and like live with them and things would be okay, and like I'm all right with like finding another job if I need to. And I say all these disclaimers because these are all of the things that allow me to write full time, because I think it matters. I think I've always, like, when I wasn't writing full time, I always really disliked when people talked about being a full-time author without talking about the ways in which their privilege sometimes allows them to do that. Because I think that matters, because you can't sell a dream. You know what I mean? Like, it's frustrating to me to have people act like it's something that is realistic for everyone, because it may not. Another thing, I live in Canada, so my healthcare is free. The only thing we pay for is like medications and things like that. But even if you don't have insurance, to pay for things like medication is very affordable. It's significantly more affordable than doing the same in the United States. And so also, like, that's another consideration. Another one is that my publisher is in the US, so I get paid in US dollars, and the Canadian dollar is very bad. So when the US money converts, I get more money than what was sent to me. So, you know, if they send me $10, when it converts, I get 15 and things like that. And so that also makes a difference because basically once the money converts, my agent fee, the 15% deduction, I essentially end up getting most of that back. So I end up with a larger amount in the end, which means I can kind of stretch it out more. So I just want to like make that clear up front. But for me, my attitude is very much like, I'm thinking of like going forward in the years, and I'm constantly assessing how I can continue to write full time. And so right now, because I've gotten like this year, I got technically 2 advance payments. So I got a partial of the advance for Blood Like Magic, and I got a partial of the advance for the Butcher Birds deal. And so I was given 2 payments in 1 year. So there was a larger amount of income, but I also do planning for like how this income will be in the next year and the next year. And so because this is my first year doing it, like to me, this year has been quite stable because I have gotten my largest payments this year. So it hasn't been difficult for me. It's been really comfortable. But in the next years, that may change. So it's hard to like say how that's going, because right now it's going great and everything is fine and I have no worries. But would that change in years down the line? I don't know. But for now, like being a full-time author to me is wonderful. I truly am living my best life. I am living the dream. I am very happy. And like things are going great. But yeah, the only consideration is I'm like, oh, like how will other projects sell, and like making sure I can continuously do this, which is kind of up in the air. I just thought of this as an aside. The difficulty for me with writing books as a living is that there is a very large level of unpredictability, because you don't know if your book is going to sell and if you'll therefore be able to make money and like have another advance coming up. You don't know if your book is going to have foreign sales to add on little chunks of money. You don't know if your book is going to have a film sale to add on chunk of money. You don't know if your book is going to earn out really fast and therefore you're getting royalties quickly. You don't know any of that. And so I think that unpredictability is what can make writing full-time in this industry really difficult. How many shelved projects do you have? A bunch. So many shelved projects. I would say like the ones that are full-length projects that are shelved, if like things that I actually wrote the entire book. Of those, there's my first book, my second book. There is, so the first one, which was like a Twilight ripoff, it was bad. The second one was problematic, witch book, and then the Caribbean high fantasy, where I struggled with the age category, and I couldn't figure it out, and it made me mad. So and I didn't feel like I tried to make it MG and it wouldn't work. It was YA, it didn't quite work because I wanted to make it lower YA, and the industry is difficult with lower YA, so that one is shelved. And then what else did I do? Oh, the adult horror, 6 Days and 5 Nights. How many fingers was I holding? 4. 6 Days and 5 Nights. That one has been shelved. And I think that's it. Yeah, so 4 for like actual full novel length completed shelved projects. I have 4. And then for like projects where I like wrote like 10,000 words and stopped, so many. Wrote 5,000 words and stopped, so many. Wrote 1,000 words and stopped, so many. I'm one of those people, because I have so many ideas, it's like really easy for me to get started on one and then decide it's not working and just like not bother with it and shelve it. So like quite a few, but like 4 that are like full books that I even did edits on in some cases. When you write, do you focus more on time spent writing or total word count? I focus on word count. I always do word count goals. The reason I don't do time goals is because I waste time. So if I tell myself, you have to sit down and write for 20 minutes, then I waste time. I like write slow. I look at stuff. I get distracted. I play on my phone, because there's no, like, for me, there's no drive to actually get anything done, because I can just waste time. So I always do word count goals, because if I have a word count goal, I will use the time well. I will sit down, I will focus, and I will do it, because I know that I have to reach a certain goal and I have to get it done. So that's why I do word count goals. I know some people like time goals better, but word count just has always worked the best for me. What kind of story openings do you love as a reader? I'm putting this in the author life section because, I don't know, it's personal to my life. So I figured I would just sneak it in here. As a reader, I mean, I love creepy openings. I also love dramatic openings, like in thrillers and horrors, like when something really like dramatic happens, in that like someone is like murdered at the end, or they were like, and they were never found again, or something like that. Specifically in horrors and thrillers, I think if that was in fantasy, it would actually annoy me a lot. But in thrillers, I really like those. I also like openings where you like think it's going to be the main, this is also I think specific to horror and thriller, where you think it's going to be the main character, but then it's not. Like one of the openings I think is so good is oh my gosh, why am I blanking on the name right now? Oh, There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins. That opening is so good. It's so good. And I really loved that one. I really love that book, but I really loved that one. So yeah, that's definitely an opening that I am a fan of. There's also a question here about what career planning looks like when you've sold books into the future. So I'm gonna link over here because I recently did a video where I talked about all the projects that I'm going to be working on. And in that, I really break down like the timelines that I have in my head for like when I'm going to complete them, and like, oh, this is going to happen in this year and this will be the option in this year, and that sort of thing. And that's where I like really break down how I've planned things out. But yeah, maybe if there's demand in the future, maybe I'll do a video about like how you can plan out things, plan out author career things and book things when you have contracts. But that video can give you insight into how I personally plan all of that. Now that you've gone gone through the process and your book baby is out there, what, if anything, would you do differently? What would you have the publishing company do differently? What part of the process do you look back on and think, okay, next time I'm not going to do this, I'll do this. I'm not going to do that, I'll do this instead. Also, now that it's all done, what's the most challenging part of the process for you? So probably at the end of the year or the beginning of next year, I'll do like a full reflection where I'll get into all of this, because I feel like when you debut, like there's the period like before your book comes out, but there's also a period during the same year after your book comes out, and I feel like that's really when you get like a bigger scope of how the whole experience has been. But I can chat a bit about like my experience up until now. Right now, I'm really pleased that I did not do a pre-order campaign. I think that ended up working really well for me. I'm glad I didn't do that because I think that would have been really expensive, and like my sales were good without it, which made me think that like how much impact would it have truly had. And I know a lot of people say that about pre-order incentives. It's really about like if the author wants to do it and if you want to do it and you think it's going to be fun, and for me, I just didn't want to do it, and I'm glad I stuck with that. I wish definitely, and I talked about this in a previous video, but like definitely I wished I had waited a little bit longer to get all these swag items that I bought, and would have like checked in with my publisher first to see if maybe they would have done that for me instead of just like assuming they wouldn't and doing it myself, because maybe that would have saved me some pennies as well. And I also like, I do have to think back on like, I think I would have done maybe like, I would have coordinated my giveaway efforts a little bit better. Sometimes I think I participated and I was like, oh, I don't know that this is actually the best decision for me, such helpful. So that's something to think about. I think my publisher did a lot for me. They did a lot more than I was expecting, honestly. And I think that was great. And they've been doing more going forward as well, which has been really helpful. They've also been doing ads. I don't know how those have been doing like ROI wise, like I don't have that information. Yeah, the only thing is I would have loved to have the launch that was hosted with the bookstore on my actual launch day, but it was just how schedules worked out, so that didn't really work out that way. So I ended up doing my own launch. Part of me wonders if like that was necessary, or if I should have just done the launch that they did, even if it wasn't on the same day, like that it probably would have been fine. But it was my first book and I wanted to do it on this, I wanted to do something on the actual day that it came out, and so that's why that happened. I think maybe in the future I would probably be more okay with just kind of like, if the schedule didn't work out, just being like, okay, I won't do an event on my launch day and that's fine. But maybe not, I don't know. And like things to do again, I really liked doing the videos for the cover reveal and the videos for the video for like the actual launch day. Like I actually think that was cool, and I think that had impact, and I think that made sense and worked, and so that's something I definitely want to continue doing going forward with books. I'm trying to think of anything else. I liked that I decided to like I made a list of like debut year wins, and like if something positive happened during the year, I would write that down so that if I was feeling bad at any point and I was like, womp womp womp, nobody cares about me and my book, I could look back on that list and be like, what do you mean nobody cares about you and your book? In this month, they, you know, your publisher said you were going to be on this like special video on their YouTube channel with them. So like clearly they care about your book and somebody cares. So things like that I think were really helpful. I think really tracking like positive things that are happening to you so that you can look at those when you're like having a down moment or kind of a womp womp moment. But yeah, that's kind of my halfway through the year book is out feelings. Yeah, the big things to me were the swag. I was glad I didn't do a pre-order, but I really needed to better coordinate how I was going to do swag things in the future, because that could have been done a lot better by me and I could have saved myself a lot of money and heartache. I forgot what was the most challenging part of the process. The most challenging part of the process for me has been the review thing. the review process, the accidentally seeing like negative reviews and things like that, because in the moment, even though going into it, I objectively knew that there would be people who would not like my book. I knew that there would maybe even be people who absolutely hated my book with a fiery passion and were like, I think this is absolute garbage. I knew that objectively, but it's different to know that people are going to like things about your book objectively, and it's very different to see what they didn't like about it, whether that's like accidentally seeing a review or whether that's, you know, the person who is not a nice person who decides to throw in your face all the things they hated about your book because they want you to see all the things they hated and frankly to be mean-spirited. So that was something that I find like the most challenging part of the process, because I think I didn't quite understand that there would be people who would very actively try to let me know that they didn't like something. I think I just thought I could like avoid reviews, and also I think I just like in some cases didn't prepare for the fact that I would sometimes see things in that way and like have to deal with the emotion of that, because I think everybody has the right to criticism. Everybody has the right to not like my book or hate my book or like my book and love my book. I think it's just difficult when you're like delving into it in that way, especially because through the reader relationship, it's not like a professional review in which someone is doing a sort of objective review of your book and they professionally might not like it. Something like, you know, if Kirkus was like, we thought this was kind of bland, then I would be like, okay, well, it's different because I think readers bring a sort of passion to it, and sometimes that passion, if it's like you're tagged in it or it's like thrown at you, can be difficult emotionally to deal with. So like for me, that's been the most challenging part of it, but I think I'm getting better at that, and getting better at like regulating my emotions and understanding, like, even though I have to see it, it's okay, because what this person didn't like probably other people like, and it doesn't really matter. And just to like move past it emotionally and to not circle on it and like drag myself into a negative headspace. Now on to the writing craft / writing advice questions. So advice for someone about to send their work to betas for the first time and is so anxious. There's not really any advice except do it. I think something that helps me that I understand when I send to betas and I'm like anxious and I'm like, oh my god, are they gonna like it, or oh my god, are they gonna hate it? They understand that it's a work in progress. That's the whole point of like being a beta reader. They know that this is not the final form of your book, so they are not expecting perfection. They expect that they will probably have some critiques to say. I also remind myself that this is a subjective industry, and even though I talked about my like greatest challenge is like physically seeing negative reviews, I think you have to understand that sometimes the book just may not be for them. And the great thing about beta readers is that unlike just whomever in the internet, they have signed up to help you. They have your best interests in heart. So if the book is not for them, if they are a good beta reader, which I hope they are when you pick them, they will, if it is not for them, they will be able to say that it is just subjectively not for them. You will not be like ripped apart or torn to shreds or anything like that. So that's the positive of the beta readers. And also to understand that this is part of the process for you to be able to make your book better, that you need this feedback and you need this help. So going into it like that, hopefully is more helpful for you. Advice in getting a literary agent. So this could go on for ages and ages. I feel like there's so much information about this. I also have some videos about like querying and that sort of thing. But I would say, like, as some like quick tidbits for advice in getting a literary agent, do your research so you know how to find a good agent and to avoid smagents. Do your research so that you know that you're writing the best query possible. Do your research research so that you know going into the querying process, the do's and the don'ts. Do your research so that you can get your book in the best position, in the best shape possible before you send it off. Do a lot of research to make sure you're giving yourself your best shot, because even though people will say you technically can resend the same book to an agent and there's always the unicorn, for the most part, when an agent says no, it usually remains a no. So you want to put your best foot forward, so to speak, to make sure that you are getting the best version of your work to them. What else can I say about agents? Seek agents professionally, in that you are looking for a professional who is the best fit for you and your book and can help you do the best for that book. You're not looking for a bestie. I feel like it can be easy on things like Twitter and stuff, because you can see agents that are like tweeting or that have a social media presence, and you can be like, oh wow, I really like this agent, but you're not going into this relationship to find someone to, like, it's not a best, you're not trying to find your like new friend. You're trying to find the best professional fit for your books and your work. So I would say that. What else can I say about finding a literary agent? Understanding that it's a partnership and you want it to go two ways. You want to try and find someone who you're going to work well with, and to only query agents that you would want to work with. Do not just query someone just because they're there or because you want to test things out and see if your query is good enough. Only query agents who you want to work with. And that's kind of my quick and dirty literary agent advice. What advice would you have for those trying to edit till perfection in hopes of getting an agent? So this is the difficulty, because you want to put your best work forward, as I just said, but you also don't want to get so stuck in editing and trying to achieve perfection that you never actually send anything out, because that is detrimental to your journey. If you want to be traditionally published, you need to send things out to get an agent. Something that really helped me was setting a deadline. So when I wrote Blood Like Magic, I told myself that I was going to edit for a year before I let any agent see it. So it stopped me from querying too soon, but it also gave me a self-imposed deadline to make sure that I wasn't just editing forever, because I knew I was going to get in as many rounds as I could in that year. And so I wasn't going to be continuing to edit past the year because that was the deadline, and I wasn't going to send out to agents before the year because that was the deadline. Your deadline may not be a year, it may be multiple years, it may be something like that, but I think that was really helpful for me because it gave me that goalpost. And so that's something that you could potentially do just to set yourself up so that you're not like taking too little time, but also not taking too much time. And a big thing for me that helped when I knew I was done editing, and that's helped in the projects in the past, is that when I'm sending the book out to, say, beta readers and critique partners, and the feedback that I'm getting is like super nitpicky, and because of that, it let me know that because they're beta reading and because they're CPing, they're trying to find something to critique, because they don't want to just send back your book and be like, oh, it was perfect. They want to critique something because you've sent it to them to critique. And so when the notes become extremely nitpicky, what that says to me is that they struggle to find anything, and that because they were struggling, they were trying to point out whatever little thing they could. And so I find that really helpful, especially if you're sending to multiple people in each round. If you get feedback from 3 people and all of the feedback is super like minor nitpicky things, that to me was also a signal that I had done enough editing and that I probably couldn't find anything else to do, and so it was time to start sending that out. I essentially reached as close to perfection as I could, and I also think this is the benefit of querying in rounds, and that you send to agents in rounds, so you can send to a round of like 10 agents once you have reached that level where you feel it is very, very ready. Not just like as a testing the waters thing. This is a thing that you do when you feel that it is ready and it is as perfect as you could possibly get it. And that is when you are sending in rounds, because you can send to 10 agents and see how things go. And you can kind of gauge from there the response in order to help you go forward and continue querying. But again, something that you would be doing after you already did all the like tiresome work of making sure that you were editing as much as possible. So hopefully that is helpful to you. Any tips on how to connect plot ideas like chapters? I'm wondering what this is meaning, and I'm not 100% sure, but I'm assuming you mean like, how do you connect the chapters together into like a cohesive story, I guess is what you are maybe saying. For me, the big help with this is having a story structure that I'm following. So I use the Save the Cat story structure, and so this means that, you know, I have an overarching plot, and there are basically like stations of what is going to happen. So in the first act, you have the setup where you introduce the character's world, so their home life, their school or work life, and their relationships with others. Then you have the inciting incident, which is the thing that happens that changes your character's life. And then you have the debate, which is the character kind of arguing with themselves about whether they're going to stay in the life they've always known, or that whether the inciting incident is going to push them into a new frame of life, which they always choose the latter in the book, or almost always. Like, that's how you would push the book forward. They're somehow forced to make that decision. And so in that way, there's one central plot line, and the plot line is moving forward based on that inciting incident. And so then that kind of gives you a guide for how your chapters are going to go, because you know at this point you have to have the inciting incident happen. At this point, the character has to make a decision about what they're going to do next. And those chapters are all leading towards that thing. I also try and think when I'm writing chapters, what is the goal of the chapter, to make sure that I'm carrying that forward throughout the chapter, and what is the overall goal. So what is the overall plot goal, and what is the overall goal of the character, and what are you wanting the character to learn? I hope that is helpful, but I think if you are finding that your chapters feel like they're aimless and that they're very random, I think the best help for that would be to research different types of story structures and to find one that can help you, because having that guided story structure can help give you kind of a North Star to follow, so that your chapters are following some sort of structure. And if you absolutely hate structure, I think at the very least knowing what your character is trying to achieve, and like knowing that each chapter is a step towards the character achieving that. And so in each chapter you have that goal, or you have that North Star to follow, so that your chapters are not just seeming like random events that are happening all over the place. But like for me, like having a story structure is the most helpful for that. Best tip for pacing. Also favorite curly hair product if non-writing questions are allowed. They are allowed, but I will get to the writing question first. So tips for pacing. Pacing is really hard. Pacing is something I still struggle with. I really do my best at it, but I know there are sometimes where it's really difficult, especially if you're writing a book with a lot of world building. It can be really hard to keep the pacing in your first act or throughout acts, because you have to spend time explaining things and setting up the world, which can sometimes make the pacing feel slower. So something I do to help my pacing is because I'm following the Save the Cat structure, as in Save the Cat writes a novel. The great thing about that is that there are percentages for how long each section should be. And so when I start my book, I really try and rigidly follow those percentages, because that helps me know, okay, this is kind of like a normal paced book. And then I try and adjust if I can. So for example, if I feel like the beginning is going a little bit too slow, then I might take out a couple chapters to try and find a way to make it go faster. But I think this also really depends on the type of book you're writing. Like I said, with fantasy, you might have more world building to do up front, so then you might have a longer first act just naturally because of that, versus I think in books such as like thrillers or horrors, there is a reader expectation of things like something creepy or like a death happening, or if you have a really specific setting for the book and they have to reach it, you might want it faster paced in the beginning to get them to that setting, and then you might be able to slow down later. So that is to say, pacing is really, really hard because it so very much depends on the type of book you're writing and reader expectations and what needs to happen in the book. But I definitely do think my best tip for pacing is like following the pacing of that structure to begin with, and then kind of tweaking as you go. And something that can also be really helpful for pacing is readers. So sending it out to beta readers or critique partners, because then you're getting other people who are reading it, and then they can tell you, oh, I thought the beginning was kind of slow, or I thought this part really dragged, or I thought this part was too fast and I didn't understand anything. So that's what I would definitely say. And now my favorite curly hair product. I am an Eco Styler stan. I know people have all sorts of opinions about Eco Styler. I know people are like, this isn't the best product for your hair, or like some people are like, oh, it's like more natural, and some people are like, oh, actually it's got like a bunch of like chemicals in it. But I think all sorts of things have chemicals in them, but like Eco Styler just does it. It's a very effective product, I find. But yeah, if you're like really strict about like what you want to put, what you will and won't put on your hair, then I would check that out. But I've been using that from Jump and it's really helpful. It's cheap, which is nice, or like relatively cheap. It's relatively inexpensive. It's like more inexpensive than other gels. Also, I've tried other gels and Eco Styler just has the best hold out of any of them. So that's my thing. I use the olive oil one. So anyway, back to writing and stuff. That was it for all the writing / craft advice questions. Now all the questions are questions about Blood Like Magic, very specific to Blood Like Magic. There were the odd one. I'm sorry for people that asked on Instagram where it like felt too spoilery to even discuss it, so that I didn't answer those. But sometime in the future I will be having like a full-on spoiler chat about Blood Like Magic, and then there will be all the spoilers. I'm still figuring out when I want to do that. I'm kind of trying to figure out like what time is far enough in the future, but I'll probably do it after the book has been out, like closer to like 4 or 5 months, something like that. So yeah, that is coming, but this question section, as I mentioned before, will be completely spoiler free. So let's go ahead and get started. Question number 1, are you gonna make a sequel to Blood Like Magic? Yes, there will be a sequel to Blood Like Magic. It's coming out next year. I do not know the release date. I assume it's summer, but I'm not sure. And the title hasn't been revealed yet, but I have very recently seen the cover, so very, very exciting. So I'm sure things will start to like get in motion soon enough. But yes, there will be a sequel to Blood Like Magic, and it is the series closer, so that is the end of the series. Though if you followed some of my like talks about my career planning and writing vlog things, I am going to be working on a proposal for a spin-off series, but again, it will depend on the publisher wanting to buy that, which is not a guarantee at this point, but it will be its own self-contained spin-off, separate from the series. So Voya's story will end in this second book, or end end in that I will stop following her because the spin-off series I'm planning would be following a brand new character. How long did you work on Blood Like Magic? It's brilliant. Thank you. So I heard, when did I remember this. So in NaNoWriMo 2017 is when I wrote Blood Like Magic. So I wrote it in like not even a full month, like 20 to 25 days. I can't completely remember. I wrote the first draft. And as I talked about earlier in this video, I made a promise to myself that I would edit it for a year before I sent it to any agents because I had had an issue with querying too early in the past. And so I worked on it for basically almost a year. It was like just like a week before the actual year mark when I decided it was actually ready and I started querying agents. So I worked on it for a year and then I queried my agent and we worked on it for 6 months. So that was a year and 6 months. And then I got my book deal after 4.5 months. I didn't work on it during that time because it was on submission. And then me and my editor worked together on the book. I honestly can't remember, probably like another 6 months altogether before it came out. So like roughly 2 years altogether of work on the book, I would say, something like that, 2 to 2.5. 2.5 is probably being generous, but like 2 years of work, I would say. Who was your favorite character to write in Blood Like Magic? I love Voya. She's the main character, so of course I love her and she's fantastic and great. But I really enjoy writing Keisha, who is one of Voya's cousins. Just because she's like, you know, she like tells it like it is. She says whatever she wants, whenever she wants. She's like, she's pretty like sassy. She could definitely be outright rude. She just does whatever she wants, basically. In terms of what she says, she definitely has like other things in her life where she like feels very hindered in doing whatever she wants, or she like holds back. She does occasionally know how to hold back, but I just find her to be really fun to write, and she's got some like definitely like fun one-liners and things like that I enjoy. So I have a lot of fun writing Keisha. And the final question is, how did you come up with the idea for Blood Like Magic? So I was living where I live now in Northern Ontario. I was incredibly homesick because I had never lived that far away from my family, and I just wanted to dive into Toronto. I wanted to like celebrate my city, and I had had this idea percolating that I wanted to write about a family of Black witches, and so I thought I would set it in Toronto. I pushed into the future for funsies, and I started with this image of a girl in a bath of blood, and I had to figure out what she was doing there and why she was there and everything around that, and that was basically how Blood Like Magic came together. I discovery wrote the book really for the most part. I did some very light plotting. It was not a great job. So it was a lot of discovery writing. But yeah, the book kind of just came together in that way. I ended up having a really good idea of what I wanted each character to be like and their personalities, and so it was able to come together in that way. A lot of the book was doing things that I thought were really fun and like thought would be compelling and interesting, and it kind of just came together that way. So yeah, that's basically when the idea of Blood Like Magic came from. A few of these other questions were mostly just about like what's coming next. So yeah, the sequel is coming, and I will say a bit about it here just because there were questions about it and interest, so I figure I may as well. Some things to look forward to in the sequel. Voya definitely dealing with some new responsibilities that she wasn't dealing with in the first book. Things get more difficult for her. I'm just mean like that, so that's the way it goes. New Gene, the genetics company, it continues to be involved in this book, and The first book was very focused on Voya's family and like 1 or 2 other Black Witch families, and this book brings in all 5 Black Witch families, which is really exciting for me, and some of their histories and their drama. So yeah, that's what you can expect from the Blood Like Magic sequel. And that is it for the Q&A. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. I post every Tuesday. And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye!